Imagine realizing that, like, the entire foundation of a global religion, and I guess the eternal destiny of millions of people, could be completely dismantled by the gender of a single ancient Greek noun.
Right, yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. You know, when we think about big world-shifting theological debates, we usually picture massive crowds or maybe these epic macro-level clashes of entire civilizations. We don't usually picture someone just hovering over a desk, analyzing the syntax of a dead language.
No, we really don't. It is entirely counterintuitive. I mean, we expect fireworks, but the most lethal arguments in history are often incredibly quiet. They happen in the margins of ancient manuscripts.
Exactly.
It is the absolute definition of, the devil is in the details. Or, I guess for our purposes today, the theology is in the syntax.
Yeah, which brings us to the fascinating source material we have for you today. We are exploring a massively detailed theological thesis, and it's authored by Frank Leo. And when I say detailed, I mean it is a bilingual, so English and Chinese academic, point-by-point critique of the theology of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which most people know as Mormonism.
Yes, and it's really important to understand the author's vantage point here. Frank Leo constructs this critique from a strictly orthodox, creedal Christian standpoint.
Okay.
So the explicitly stated mission of the text is to systematically rebut LDS doctrines, arguing that they are basically heretical departures from historic biblical revelation.
Right. Now, before we go a single step further, I need to make one thing absolutely crystal clear to you, our listener.
Yes, please do.
The goal of this deep dive is not to take a side.
Right.
We are not here to endorse the viewpoints of this thesis, nor are we here to attack or endorse the teachings of Mormonism.
Exactly. Our mission today is just to impartially examine how the author constructs this intricate argument. We are essentially lifting the hood to look at the mechanics of the debate.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the historical parallels, the ancient linguistics, and, the logical architecture of the thesis itself.
Right. We are touring the architecture of the argument.
Right.
And the setup for this argument is basically a two-pronged strategy.
Mm-hmm.
First, the author points out what they claim are these massive, unresolvable internal contradictions within Mormonism's own texts.
Which is a clever starting point.
It really is. And then second, they bring in the heavy artillery. So original biblical languages, we're talking ancient Hebrew, Koine Greek, Syriac, and even Ethiopian Ge'ez.
Right.
All of that alongside ancient pagan history to try and dismantle these doctrines piece by piece.
The tactical approach here is really smart. I mean, the author doesn't just start throwing Bible verses at LDS theology from the outside.
Right, they start from the inside out.
Exactly. They begin by stress testing the foundation of the house using its own materials.
Right, so they look at the first major alleged contradiction, which deals with the very nature of God himself.
Yeah.
The thesis points out that official LDS doctrine, specifically found in a text called Doctrine and Covenants, section 130, teaches that God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost are three completely separate beings.
Yes.
They aren't the traditional Christian Trinity. In this view, the Father and Son actually have distinct physical bodies of flesh and bone.
But the author immediately pivots, right, and turns to the Book of Mormon itself to point out a glaring internal contradiction.
Oh, right.
Because remember, Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, famously called the Book of Mormon the most correct of any book on earth.
Yeah.
Yet this thesis demonstrates that the Book of Mormon repeatedly teaches a highly Trinitarian or even modalistic view of God.
Wait, okay, before we go on, you said modalistic.
Oh, sure.
For the listener who might not be a theology major or who is just trying to follow the logic here, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good point to clarify.
Is that basically the idea that God is just one single person who wears three different masks or operates in three different modes rather than being three distinct persons?
That is a perfect way to put it. Modalism basically says there is only one person in the Godhead who just changes roles. Like, one actor playing the Father in scene 1 and the Son in scene 2.
Okay, got it.
Orthodox Trinitarianism, on the other hand, says there is one divine essence, but three distinct co-eternal persons. But the key here is that both of those views insist God is definitively one.
Right, one entity, essentially.
Exactly. And the author pulls specific verses to show the Book of Mormon completely agrees with that unity.
Yeah. They cite 2 Nephi 31.21 and Alma 11.44, which, I mean, they explicitly state that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost are one God.
Yes.
There's even a really fascinating verse in Mosiah 15 that says, because God dwells in flesh, he is called the Son, but subjecting the flesh to the Father, he becomes both Father and Son. It really insists they are one God.
It creates an incredible tension. I mean, the author's whole point is if the Book of Mormon is the most correct book, how can later LDS scriptures fundamentally contradict it? You can't have a God who is distinctly one God in your foundational text and then later reveal that they're actually three separate, distinct physical beings.
Okay, let's unpack this, though. Couldn't an LDS scholar just argue that this is progressive revelation?
Sure.
Like God gives a simplified version early on and then reveals the more complex reality of three separate physical beings later.
An LDS scholar absolutely would argue that. But the author of the thesis frames this as a bridge too far for progressive revelation.
How so?
Well, progressive revelation usually means adding detail, not completely overturning the fundamental definition of reality.
Oh, okay.
To use an analogy, it would be like finding a nation's founding constitution that explicitly states, we are a monarchy governed by one king.
Right.
And then a later amendment claims, we have always been a democracy governed by three separate presidents.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not an update.
Right. It's a complete reversal.
Yeah.
The author argues Mormonism basically cannot have it both ways. Before the Bible even enters the chat, the LDS scriptural canon is at war with itself.
That is a wild setup. It sets the stage brilliantly. But building on this question of whether God is one singular being or three separate beings, the thesis then deploys its heaviest intellectual artillery.
The ancient linguistics.
Exactly, ancient linguistics. The author goes all the way back to the Shema in Deuteronomy 6.4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Yeah, and the Shema is the foundational cry of Jewish monotheism. I mean, it was recited daily.
Right.
The author zooms in on the specific Hebrew word used for one here, which is echad.
Echad.
Yes. They argue that in this specific grammatical context, because it's modifying the proper singular name of God, echad, denotes absolute numerical unity. It is an indivisible singular Lord.
Okay, and they don't stop at Hebrew either. They take us into the Koine Greek of the New Testament, specifically the famous opening of John 1.1.
Right. In the beginning was the Word.
And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, the author notes a crucial grammatical detail here. They point out that the Greek word for God, theos, lacks an article in the predicate position.
Yeah.
Okay, grammar check. When you say it lacks an article in the predicate position, you're going to lose me and probably a lot of people listening.
That's fair.
Can we translate that into plain English? What is the author actually proving here?
Yeah, let's break that down. In English, an article is a word like the or a.
Right.
If John had put the definite article the in front of theos, so if he had written the Word was the God, it would mean the Word and the Father are the exact same person.
Ah, okay. That would be that modalism we talked about earlier.
Exactly. One actor, two masks.
But he didn't write that.
Right, he didn't. But if John had meant the Word was just a completely separate secondary God, which aligns more with LDS theology, he would have structured the grammar differently to imply a God.
Okay, so what does leaving the article out actually do?
By leaving the article out entirely in that specific part of the sentence, Greek grammar does something very elegant. It emphasizes essence or nature.
Essence.
Yeah, it means the Word has the exact same divine nature as the Father, while remaining a distinct person. It's the ultimate defense of the Orthodox Trinity, distinct in person, identical in essence.
So the grammar explicitly forbids the idea that the Word is just a separate God standing alongside the Father.
Precisely.
The Word is God in essence. And the thesis backs this up by citing Isaiah 43.10, where God declares, "Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be after me." The author uses this to attack the LDS concept of eternal progression.
Yes, eternal progression is the LDS teaching that God the Father was once a mortal man on another planet who progressed to godhood, and that humans on Earth can eventually do the exact same thing.
But Isaiah shuts that door completely. No God formed before, no God formed after. Period.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and where I kind of want to push back a bit on the author's premise. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone defending the LDS perspective here.
Okay, sure.
If you are listening to this and you're familiar with LDS apologetics, you might say, okay, sure, the Bible says God and Jesus are one, but they are just one in their purpose.
Oh.
Like a fairly unified board of directors, three separate guys, but they vote the same way, they act as one body. How does this thesis counter that board of directors argument?
The author anticipates that exact counter-argument and brings in John 10.30 to dismantle it.
What does John 10:30 say?
This is the verse where Jesus explicitly says, I and the Father are one. The author points out that if you look at the original Greek, the specific word Jesus uses for one is hen. Now, hen is a neuter noun.
Wait, a neuter noun?
Yeah.
As opposed to masculine or feminine?
Precisely. And this is where the gender of a single word literally changes everything.
Yeah.
If Jesus merely meant they were united in purpose or aligned in their goals, like your board of directors analogy, the grammatically correct choice would have been the masculine word heis.
Heis. Okay.
Yeah, that would mean one person or one entity in agreement with another person.
Oh, wow. So by choosing the neuter...
By using the neuter hen, it translates literally to one thing. It is an ontological claim.
Okay, let's define ontological for the listener really quick.
Right. Ontology is the study of being. An ontological claim is a claim about what something fundamentally is at the core of its existence.
Got it.
So Jesus isn't saying we agree on what to do. He is saying we are the exact same thing. It's a unity of essence, not just a unity of separate persons working together.
And if you're wondering if we're just, like, overanalyzing a single ancient word here, the author points out that the ancient audiences understood this grammar perfectly.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the moment Jesus dropped that neuter noun, the crowds immediately picked up stones to kill him for blasphemy.
Yes.
They didn't think he was claiming to be a good employee, perfectly aligned with his boss. They knew he was claiming to be the exact same essence as the creator of the universe.
Exactly. The historical reaction of the crowd proves the linguistic argument. They understood the syntax.
That is just wild. But, this strict linguistic definition of God's singular essence naturally forces us into the author's next target, which is the physical nature of God.
Right.
Because if God is this singular, absolute, undivided essence, does he have a physical body?
Which brings us back to that LDS claim in Doctrine and Covenants 130, right? That the Father has a tangible body of flesh and bones as tangible as man's.
Right. And the author brings out John 4.24 to refute this. Jesus says God is spirit.
Yeah.
And the author points out that in the original Greek text, the word spirit is placed at the very beginning of the sentence for heavy emphasis.
It is.
It's not just a description of an attribute. It's an essential statement about God's foundational nature. God doesn't just have a spirit inside a body. God is spirit.
And they compound this with a text from the Wisdom of Solomon.
Wait, the Wisdom of Solomon? That's not in the standard Protestant Bible, right?
Yeah.
Is that what people call deuterocanonical?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Deuterocanonical just means second canon. These are books accepted by Catholic and Orthodox traditions, and while Protestants don't view them as authoritative scripture, they are still incredibly valuable historical records of ancient Jewish theology.
Right.
So the Wisdom of Solomon 1.7 states that the Spirit of the Lord fills the entire world. The author uses this to argue a logistical point.
Which is?
A being with a localized physical body of flesh and bones sitting on a throne cannot simultaneously fill the entire universe. True omnipresence requires an incorporeal, non-physical nature.
So what does this all mean? I see the logic, but isn't that a bit of an abstract philosophical argument?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, couldn't a critic say, well, God's body is magical, maybe he can fill the universe?
Uh-huh.
But the author actually grounds this in a much more concrete argument using Luke 24, don't they?
Yes, they do. And this is perhaps their tightest logical trap in the entire thesis.
Okay, let's hear it.
In Luke 24, the resurrected Jesus appears to his terrified disciples. They think he's a ghost.
Right.
Jesus tells them to touch him, and he explicitly states, "A spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have."
Oh, wow. Okay, so Jesus himself provides the literal definition of a spirit. A spirit does not have flesh and bones.
Precisely. So the author runs the logical formula based entirely on Jesus' own words.
Right.
Premise 1, Jesus says a spirit does not have flesh and bones. Premise 2, John 4.24 says God is spirit. The unavoidable conclusion, God cannot have flesh and bones.
I mean, the author is setting up a logical trap using Jesus' own words, right? A is B, C is not B, so A cannot be C.
That is devastatingly simple.
It really is. The author uses Jesus' own definition of a spirit to logically dismantle the LDS claim that the Father has a physical body. The Son has a body because of the incarnation.
Yeah.
He took on human flesh. But the Father, who is essentially spirit, cannot.
It leaves no room for ambiguity. But this argument against a physical body acts as a perfect gateway into the most explosive historical comparison in the thesis.
Right, because if God doesn't have a physical body, he definitely cannot have a literal physical wife.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the LDS doctrine of a heavenly mother. This is the teaching that humans aren't just created beings. We are the literal, biological spirit children procreated by heavenly parents.
And this is where the thesis steps away from Greek grammar and dives deep into comparative mythology.
Which is so interesting.
It is. The author takes this LDS concept of divine procreation and maps it onto ancient paganism. And the structural parallels are just staggering.
It's like discovering that, 4 completely different competing tech companies all secretly use the exact same open source code to build their operating system.
Yes.
The author is essentially arguing that Mormonism is running on ancient Canaanite source code.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. I mean, the author looks at the ancient Canaanite pantheon, the religion of the people living around the ancient Israelites.
Right.
In Canaanite religion, you have a chief god named El. El has a physical form. He sits on a throne. And he has a divine consort or wife named Asherah.
Okay.
And together, through literal procreation, El and Asherah produced the other 70 gods of the pantheon.
But why? I mean, why did the Canaanites and the Greeks with Zeus and Hera and the Romans with Jupiter and Juno, why did all these ancient societies land on the exact same blueprint? A physical chief god, a wife, and procreated baby gods.
It comes down to the environment they lived in. These were agrarian societies.
Oh, okay.
They lived and died based on whether the rain fell and the crops grew, so they projected their own biological, earthly reality up into the heavens.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, to them, the fertility of the earth was a direct result of the fertility of the gods. If the gods are procreating and producing divine offspring, the land is producing crops. The author argues that this divine family tree isn't a coincidence. It is the universal, survival-based blueprint of paganism.
And the author points out that some early LDS leaders even taught that God had multiple wives, which, that maps right onto Zeus having multiple consorts or El having multiple goddesses. It's the same operating system.
But the author doesn't just say, hey, look, Mormonism looks like Canaanite religion. They take it a step further. They point out that the biblical prophets explicitly, violently condemned this exact theological blueprint.
Wait, the author isn't just saying these ideas rhyme a little bit. They're claiming this is a structurally identical theology to the exact religions the ancient Israelites were actively fighting against.
Yes, exactly. If you read the Old Testament, the Israelites are constantly getting in trouble for this.
Yeah, the thesis cites 1 Kings 15 and Judges 3, where the Israelites are severely punished for worshiping the Baals and the Asheroth.
Right.
King Josiah is praised as one of the most righteous kings in history, specifically because he purged the Jewish temple of objects dedicated to Asherah-like. He violently removed the idea of a divine female consort to God.
The author's devastating conclusion here is that giving God a wife and claiming we are their divine offspring is not a restored truth of original Christianity.
Wow.
It is the literal historical definition of the apostasy that the prophets of Israel shed blood to fight against.
Yep.
The framework of a physical chief god, a divine wife, procreated spirit children, and a council of gods. This is an ancient pagan architecture that is actively condemned by orthodox biblical revelation.
Which flows directly into the final major critique of the thesis. Because if you have this divine procreating family tree, it fundamentally changes what human beings are.
This does.
We aren't just creations anymore. We're biological offspring of deity. And that forces us to look at the author's final critique. If we are baby gods, can we grow up to be full gods?
Yes, the doctrine of exaltation. Found in Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, this is the LDS teaching that through eternal celestial marriage, regular humans can be exalted, join the pantheon, and become gods themselves.
But the author uses Matthew 22.29-30 as a counterstrike here.
They do.
In that passage, the religious leaders are questioning Jesus about marriage in the afterlife. And Jesus explicitly states that in the resurrection, people neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven.
And once again, the author proves their point by diving into the grammar. Oh, back to the grammar. I love it.
In the original Greek text of Matthew, Jesus uses a double negative construction out gemazontai. It translates to neither do they marry, nor are they given in marriage.
Okay.
Now, in English, a double negative is bad grammar.
Right. It cancels out.
Exactly. But in ancient Greek, a double negative is an intensifier. It isn't just a casual no, it is a categorical absolute denial. There was absolutely no marriage in the resurrection.
It seems the author's tactic is to isolate a highly specific LDS claim, like celestial marriage or humans becoming gods, and then scour antiquity to find the exact ancient text that acts as its kryptonite.
That's a great way to put it.
Because I noticed the author uses the Ethiopian gaze texts of 1 Enoch and the Book of Jubilees here, too. You have to ask, why pull from such obscure sources?
Well,
If you're listening to this and you've never heard of Ethiopian gaze, you might be wondering, why go all the way to Ethiopia to prove a point about Greek and Hebrew theology?
you go to Ethiopia for the exact same reason you go to Syria or Greece, to prove an overwhelming universal consensus. Oh, I see.
If you want to prove that an idea didn't exist anywhere in the ancient world, you have to check all the corners. By pulling from Hebrew, Greek, Syriac, and the Ethiopian gaze traditions, the author is showing that across every ancient textual tradition of the Judeo-Christian world, there is a unanimous, unshakable consensus.
Right, like in 1 Enoch, where the angels address God saying, "You alone are the God of God."
Exactly. The author uses that to say, look, even in these highly expansive, mystical, ancient texts from the fringes of the empire, there is no pantheon of co-equal gods.
Yeah.
There is no divine council where humans are being promoted to deity status. The Book of Jubilees explicitly prophesies against the worship of strange gods or importing foreign deities.
Okay.
The author is surrounding the LDS claims with a fortress of ancient witnesses from every linguistic corner of the early church and Second Temple Judaism.
It's basically saying you cannot find your theology in any dialect, in any canon, in any region of the ancient biblical world. It is a systematic dismantling using the very tools of historical and textual criticism.
It is relentless. They build a wall of ancient evidence that leaves very little room to maneuver.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, why does a dense bilingual theological thesis matter to someone who might just be trying to learn about the world or maybe prep for a comparative religion class?
Yeah, why does it matter?
To me, it matters because this thesis is an absolute masterclass in argumentation. It shows us how deeply held foundational beliefs, entire worldviews really, can be rigorously stress-tested.
Absolutely.
By using linguistics, historical context, and logical deduction, the author doesn't just say, "I disagree with you." They show the structural beams holding the argument up, and then they apply massive pressure to see if those beams snap.
And I think the lingering takeaway here is just the sheer weight of history carried by language. Throughout this deep dive, we've seen how entire universes of belief, whether the creator of the universe has a physical body, whether we ourselves can become gods, whether there is a heavenly mother, all of it can hinge on the translation of a single ancient Greek or Hebrew word.
Words like ashad or, a neuter noun like hen.
Yes.
It raises a massive, provocative question for you to explore on your own today. Think about it. How much of our modern worldview, even completely outside the realm of religion like in our politics, our laws, our cultural norms, is resting on the razor's edge of how we interpret a single, seemingly insignificant word from thousands of years ago?
It is a really profound thought. The grammar of a dead language really does continue to shape the universe we live in today.
It really does.